So I'm here with Larry Holcomb. Hi, Larry. How you doing?
Hi Mike, how you doing? You right?
I'm really good. And we're here to talk about the make unique music process because Larry has been through this process quite a while back now and has had enough time for it to kind of really take hold and start to move the needle in terms of your music. That's fair to say, isn't it?
I'd say so, yeah.
So why don't you tell everybody, your background, what you do, how long you've been making music, what you're doing now, all of that kind of thing.
Okay. So I've been making music since 2002. I've had various different projects over the years, doing first of all drum and bass, then new school breaks, and then dubstep and moombahton and trap and stuff like that. And now I've got a new project called Get to Know, which is really the result of the course, which is kind of describe it as like Foles, Chromeo, and Todd Terje in the studio together. So disco-y, but with a kind of indie aesthetic as well. I'm also the mix and mastering engineer for CR2 Records. So I do all their in-house mixing and mastering, and also for clients. I run a sample pack company with CR2 Records called Sample Tools by CR2, and I'm their kind of head sound designer for the sample packs. I do lots of library music, and various other bits and
Come on,
bobs.
what else? What else, Larry? Is that it? Jeez. So you well, I mean, the first thing you did with me was the Start Now Finish Fast course, and we're not going to talk about that now, but basically that showed you that making music didn't have to be like this extremely long, drawn out, nightmarish process of complete and utter self, beating yourself with a nasty stick. And so now you're making music much faster, right?
Yes.
And spending with all of those different things that you're doing at the moment, I mean, how much time are you spending on actually your own original music?
I do two lots of 50 minutes in the morning. So 50 minutes.
50.
50, yeah. And that depends on how much of the week I'm dedicating to kind of other aspects of my project. So, for example, this week I've done a guitar session for 4 hours. I had a singer in all day yesterday. So that in that case, the morning sessions go down to 50 minutes in the morning, so I can fit in all the freelance work. So I have to be just super organized. And that's why Start Now Finish Fast was so useful, is that I don't have the luxury of having 2 weeks to make a kick drum, for example. So I have to make sure that I get a lot done in the time I have available. So I'm able to juggle all these things. So that's why it was just so useful to do that.
And in terms of kind of your time, I mean, I think one of the things that probably a lot of people who are full-time musicians, or even people who aren't full-time musicians, people who do it in their spare time, they've got limited time to spend on music. One of the things that I think people are surprised by who aren't full-time musicians is that when you become a full-time musician, you still have very limited time to make music. It's just like, what about you, especially if it's going really well, because you've got all of this other stuff that starts coming your way. So what... I think one of the things holding people back from the thought of doing what you need to do to make unique music, and it's like, what if I'm wasting all this time, and what if the experiments, for want of a better word, are a waste of time, and I need to make this count, kind of thing. What would your kind of response be to that? Because you've just reeled off all the things that you spend every week doing, which is an enormous amount, and still you're managing to do it. So how does that work?
Well, I mean, I'd probably quote you actually, in that if you're faced with the fact that there's 5,000 tracks or whatever it is a day going on Beatport, it's just there's no alternative. You have to make something unique. So in that time you have available, I mean, It's frustrating sometimes. And actually, when I did the make unique music process, there are times where it is really, really difficult and it's really, really frustrating. But you have to always hold that in your head that the end goal is necessary. Because the way I see it, really, there's a few different ways to kind of make it. I think the main way and the most important way is to come with really good quality music, but that is unique. And unique is more important than the good quality.
Yeah.
I think it to be fresh and different is the most important thing. I think there are possibly some other ways. I think if you're the promoter of the best night and the hottest night, you can get success and you can DJ a lot, and maybe if you run the coolest label, then maybe there's avenues for that. But if you're a producer, and you don't do those things, to me, the only way is to make unique music, or at least be on the road to doing that.
Yeah, and I would argue that the only definition of quality that makes sense to me, actually, because that idea, what does that word quality actually mean? Because we assume there's this kind of this assumption has kind of fallen upon the electronic music industry, and I'm sure not everyone has it, but there is this general assumption that what we mean by quality is production quality, right? But that to me isn't quality. That isn't the most fundamental expression of quality in a piece of music. To me, a piece of music is quality if the music is quality. I mean, if you've got a crap piece of music and quality production, all you've got is a really nice sounding piece of crap.
And you basically got a waste of time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So making it sound quality if it's not actually going to move people in any way. And I think doing the work with CR2, I'm basically a cog in the wheel of CR2, and I see how all these things, a big independent record label, I see how everything fits together. I'm mates with the A&R guys. I'm going down to the office this afternoon to spend the afternoon in the office. So I watch how this all works, and I'm telling you that when people are sending in demos, what they're looking for is the next thing that's going to blow people away. They're not looking for someone who can sound like someone they've already got signed, but not quite as good. If they can sound like someone they've already got signed and better, yeah, they'll sign it. But what they really, what their dream is to get sent the thing that pricks their ears up and they think, I've never heard that before, and people are going to love it. That's what all these labels are looking for.
Well, it reminds me, what you're saying reminds me of I'm going to murder the quote, but it's a Wayne Gretzky quote, which is that you want to get to where the puck is going, not to where it's already been. So you actually go ahead of the curve, because the thing is, if you're listening to and if you're trying to make something that sounds like something that's already out, then by the time you actually get it to the point of sending it to the record label, and it's going to be out of date to them, because they're releasing stuff that they signed 6 months, a year, who knows, but a long time ago. So if you're basing your sound on what is happening right now, then you're going to be way, 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 way behind. So then the next question is, so how do I know what to make then? Well then, you don't, do you? Because you don't know what is actually going on now. So what you do is you make something that you want to make, and you make it, you make it honestly. You think, well, what are the things that I like? What are the things that influence me? And how can I make something that is different? And of course, one of the influences is going to be the stuff that you like that's happening now. But it doesn't have to be just that. And trying to sound like someone else isn't, you can make a living from it, probably, just about, but it's going to be really, really precarious. Do you know what I mean? The moment when things started happening to me was when this clicked for me, and when things started happening for me, I probably should say, was when I kind of got this, and I was like, okay, so I need to go to where the puck is going to be, because I always felt like I was just like behind, because I was kind of always playing catch up. I was like, okay, so what's going to happen next, or what do I want to happen next? What is missing? What is missing in the market now that would be different and people would love? that was one of the questions that I answered, and then when I did that and I got it, everything kind of kicked off. So on that note, how have things kicked off for you?
Well, since I started Get to Know, which was actually kind of like the last, it felt like the last throw of the dice in a way for my ideas, because I tried all these different things.
So this was during the Make Unique music process, because we kind of emailed quite a bit, didn't we, during the time you were doing it? And
yes, I think I was kind of split between wanting to do something which was kind of a bit of a banker in terms of accessibility for people, and it's basically stuff that I thought would make money.
Yeah.
So I knew how to make all the kind of big room genres, so I was thinking I was going to go down that road, and that was when I actually came across the program and started doing it. So my first experiments were with that kind of sound, but deep down, I kind of knew that it's just not my personality, and I never really liked that kind of music, and I was probably doing it for the wrong reasons. So those experiments led me to kind of a lot of soul searching, and I realized that really that wasn't what I wanted to do. So then I tried some other things, and it was actually CR2 gave me a track that I really liked, and I said, let me do a remix of it. And I kind of used that as a bit of a experimentation tool. So I did 2 different remixes, and kind of the first one was this kind of like EDM, but it's like disco-y kind of hybrid. And I sent it to them, and they were like, yeah, it's cool, but we're not sure if anyone kind of at Radio 1 would play it, and etc. And then, I got really disheartened about that, actually, because I was kind of really happy with it at the time. And actually, at the time, what I was mostly listening to was 80s boogie and 80s funk and stuff like that, post-disco kind of stuff. And it was weird because I just completely ignored that as a thing, and I kind of sat down and was like, well, if I'm honest, that is what I like listening to at the moment, especially is 80s post-disco kind of stuff and like indie kind of vibe. So that was my like final experiment, was to do something like that. And I sent it back to CR2, and they were like, this is great, and all the people at the label were like, this is really, really good, and I kind of was like, yeah, and I played it to a few of my mates that were, this is really cool. So that kind of led me onto it. So then I started this Get to Know project. And then since then, to answer your question, I did a remix for some people that Space Studio, and that got signed to Virgin. It got Radio 1 play from Mr. Jam, and then I've since had support from Annie Mac, Radio 1, and Danny Howard at Radio 1 as well. I've done remixes for Parlophone, Warner, Virgin. I'm doing a Coldplay remix at the moment, kind of on spec, so we'll see about that one. And the strange thing is that since I started doing something which was much more taking the time out to really work out what my personality was and what I wanted to do, and really not thinking about what are other people doing. All these things have come to me. I haven't really had to go out and check out my new sick track. I haven't been able to do that kind of thing. It's been coming to me. So I got a residency now at a night called Shut the Front Door, which is kind of probably like the biggest new disco-y kind of night in the UK. And that's just someone who's contacted me. I haven't gone out and looked for it. It's been coming to me. So I've noticed, because I have been doing this for a long time, making music, and my other projects I've had success with, but it's always kind of been like, this is what's hot at the moment. So I'm going to go, that's going to be my kind of template, and I'm going to try and put in as much of myself as possible within that framework. And I have had success, but it's been a lot more having to really go out and find it, and use contacts and stuff
Hustle.
like that. And there's nothing doing that. Yeah, hustle, exactly. Yeah. Whereas I think it's simple, like as you say in your explanations for why you come up with the process, is that if you are the only person that is going to sound like that and people like it, then where else are they going to go?
Well, they can't. There isn't anywhere else to go. You are the sole supplier.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a supply and demand thing, isn't it? It's like market forces, and if anyone gets upset about talking about music in terms of a market, but that's what it is. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's a music industry and there's a market, and if there's a lack of supply, then the value of that thing goes up. It's just
100%.
of course, and that's.
And how can we not talk about it in terms of,
No, exactly.
we're in my studio here. I pay rent for the studio,
Yeah, exactly.
If I don't have any money, I don't have my studio, I don't pay any rent, So to not think of it in terms of business is foolish, because
It is.
we have to eat, we have to live, and everything else, So and like a big thing for me as well was actually during the course, kind of. I think one of the most important aspects of the course, and something which was amazing for me actually, was just to listen to huge amounts of music. And I think if you listen to lots of music, and a large portion of that being new music which is coming out all the time, keeping up to date with what's going on, I think that using the tools that you teach in that course, you kind of have a template for continuing to be unique to yourself and also relevant throughout your whole career. So if you continue to follow that and you don't kind of like leave that path, then there's no reason why you ever have to go through a stage where you're not relevant.
Well, I mean,
because I stop listening to new music, a lot of the time, and that's where they get stuck in that kind of, well, we're doing this sound, and then the only thing we know for sure is that music will change, and when it does change, if you don't have that, if you're not on that path of constantly updating what you're into and what you're listening to and getting new influences, then you get left behind.
Well, I mean, I think, it's important to say, because I'm sure a lot of people do listen to lots of music, but they probably, and it's difficult especially when you're a gigging DJ, because you've always got to listen to the new music in what you're known for. I had this problem. But it's really, really important, I think, to continue your journey, because I don't think you ever reach the point of like, right, now I'm done, and now this is it forever. You know what I mean? It wants to always be gradually iterating and changing and moving forward, according to partly what's going on around you, but according to what happens to you and things you hear or inspirations you get. And I think it's really important to listen as widely as possible at all times as well, to keep that kind of channel open, because when you start to just listen to one type of music, it's a natural human reaction to kind of start to categorize things and I talk about this a lot in the program, but categorize things ever more kind of narrowly, so that you start to notice the differences between what is essentially the same music, basically. So you're like, yeah, well, my music is unique because I use this type of snare drum and nobody else uses that type of snare drum, and it's like, dude, it's a snare drum. it's not different enough. Let's say, and that's not to sort of do the music down, but it's just to say that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about tiny little things, because the vast majority of people listening to that snare drum won't realise that means it's totally different from everything else. They'll just hear the kind of whole thing. So I think you're right. I think listening is half of the battle, and listening as widely as possible. I mean, how do you kind of listen to stuff? Do you have like a process for your listening?
I tell you, one of the biggest things is Spotify. As much as it's probably terrible for the amount of money they pay artists, as a consumer, it's amazing.
It really is, yeah.
It's amazing, and I use the Discover Weekly feature a lot on Spotify. So that's kind of my routine, is that I try and do some exercise every morning, and I listen to that every single morning while I'm doing it, because that's really fantastic. I listen to Annie Mac on Radio 1 every evening when I'm cooking dinner, and that's great because it's all different kinds of music. So it'd be rock music to dance music, hip hop, whatever. So that's really good. I just discovered loads of new stuff from that. And then I use Spotify Radio a lot. So if I find a track, like especially for older stuff, I'll do that a lot. And I use the Spotify playlists. So I'll just go through a month of just listening to 90s shoegaze indie playlists and just discovering loads of stuff. And the way I do it is I have Evernote lists. So as soon as I hear, I have two main lists. One's like music ideas and one's sound design ideas. So the music ideas, as soon as I hear something which I like, it might be a chord progression, it might be an atmosphere, a feel of the track or whatever it is. I write that down in the music ideas list. Then on the weekend, what I try and do is spend one session on the weekend just at home on my laptop in headphones, just experimenting with one of these ideas, and then finishing those off in the studio when I have time. And then the sound design thing, as soon as I hear, I might not love the track, but I like a certain sound in there. I put that in Evernote with a time reference. And then like the sound design in my tracks is basically a combination of those sounds, you know? So it's so good because, you know, you don't need to sit there going, well, I need to find some kind of like swelling crescendo kind of sound, you know, because it's like, for me, it's always using a reverse piano because there's a track that had that and I was just like, I just love that sound, you know, a flanging reverse piano. So I don't think people care that you always use, in fact, I think people like the fact that you always use a flanging piano.
I mean, if you think of all these, like, you know, so, you know, I call it genre elements. So there are these different things in any sound, and we make a category based on those elements. So if you've got a certain number of things which are always present, or at least for a certain period of time, because obviously, as we've already discussed, you're going to be moving forward gradually, but that are always present. I mean, it's got a number of benefits, hasn't it? It allows people, it gives people kind of aural hooks. So as soon as they hear it, they're like, oh, I know who that is, without knowing why they know that, without knowing why they know who that is. It's kind of like the instrumental equivalent of having a singer on a band, because you recognise the voice. So you're like, oh, it's that band, you know, oh, it's Coldplay or whatever. So those kind of things, like a reverse, you know, whatever it is, you know, whether it be that or something else, in a large portion of your tracks, are actually going to be, it's actually going to be a really big help to people to actually say that's get to know or whoever. But the other good thing is that it saves a lot of time.
100%.
It's like, you know, if you know that there's certain things that you're always going to do, or not always is a difficult word, but you know, at this point in time for a while, this is how I'm going to do it. You know, because there will come a point, I presume, that you're going to get completely sick of doing that, but that's fine. And also, that time is going to come way before the people listening to your music are going to get sick of it as well, because you listen to your music like 1,000 times more than.
Sure, yeah. I mean, that then becomes the like the challenge of what, once you feel like you are making fairly unique music, that's then the balancing act you have to work on, is, you know, how you don't want to feel like you're just making the same track over and over again with different, you know, with slight differences. So then the challenge is kind of like how fast you move things along, and but it's a far better challenge than I'm making the same music as everyone else, well, and I'm putting stuff up on SoundCloud and no one cares. You know, what am I going to do about it? That's a far worse problem than, you know, yeah, how long am I going to do this, and what's the next thing which is deeply personal to me going to be? You know, that's a far better thing to have.
But I mean, I think the framework within the kind of make unique music process means that you can do this gradually over time, because you're always changing things, you're always trying other influences. I mean, it's that kind of it's not really confusion, but that worry that people have that if they make something that unique, it's like this idea that unique has to be 1,000,000% different from everything else, and that's so, you know, from what you're doing now, the get to know stuff that you're doing now, the next thing doesn't have to be something completely different. You know, it's not like you have to completely reinvent absolutely the wheel. What it is that gradually you're changing this about it. So say the flange, eventually, you know, you change the flange piano, so you do something else, or, you know, you change the way that you, I don't know, process vocals or whatever it might be. But gradually these things are changed. So you're always moving forward, always developing, always using these new influences. Maybe you start listening to some, I don't know, underwater ear flute music, and you're like, oh mate, I love the way that goes, and then you start using that, or whatever it might be. You know, there's hundreds of different things, or something happens to you, like something really horrible, or something really amazing that kind of impacts your music, and suddenly it becomes much darker, or whatever, or whatever it is. You could probably still take, for instance, that let's say your music became much darker. You could probably take exactly the same instrumentation and make much darker music with it. In fact, that would be an interesting. Do you know what I mean? That would be an interesting experiment to do. Not that you, not that you want to do, but there are lots of different ways to change it without changing it, so that people still know it's you, but they can hear there's this, you know, development. I think it's not a case of either it's totally weird and out there, or it's totally different to what I was doing before, or it's the same as everyone else. You know what I mean? There's a sliding scale, isn't there?
Well, it's kind of simple, isn't it? Like it's a kind of a simple equation. You put in listening to loads of music, working out what you love about that music, music from your past, music current, who you are, all the things you're talking about. Like at the other end of it, that's the result's only going to be a result of the inputs, you know. So if the inputs are like underwater ear flute music and glitchy electronica soundtracks, then probably what you make at the end is going to be quite weird, you know. But that's your personality, then that's what you've come up with.
Yeah.
That's great. If that's what you love, you're only putting in what you love, so you're going to love the result. And there's a lot of people in the world, you know, and there's going to be people out there that love that result as well. But if you're putting in, you're into deep house and you're into folk and you're into something else, and you're going to make something which is not going to be really weird at all. It's going to be something which is going to be quite pleasant for people to listen to. And if that's also your personality, then I agree. I don't think unique is just a result of what you're putting into the process. It's not by definition going to be weird, because that's not what it's about, is it?
I mean, I guess the way of putting it is if like there's a category of stuff which is unique, then weird is a very small subcategory of it. You know, weird music is definitely unique, but it's not the same thing. I mean, it's not like not all vegetables are potatoes, you know. So, I mean, the other thing that I think people often think about music is that everything's already been done before. You know, it's all been all of the music. You know, there's so much music being made now. It's all been done. So, you know, what's the point? You know, there's nothing that I can do that's going to be different. What would you say to that?
I think, again, if you're putting in your own tastes, your own personality, your own experiences, then it's going to be something which is unique, you know, because you are a unique entity in the universe. You know, so, like, you're going to have your own individual experiences and tastes, but the secret is you have to. You can't be lazy. You need to go through the process and do it properly. You know, it's no good, like you said, putting in a snare drum that is layered with an acoustic snare drum. No one's going to notice that. You know, you can't be lazy. You need to really sit down and think about it and do experiments. But you know, my music is like, I think people would definitely say I have a sound. You know, but it's not. It is different, and I can't find anyone else who sounds exactly the same. But it's kind of not. It's not weird, and it's not wildly different, and it's working on references that people understand. It sounds very 80s. It sounds like 80s boogie, but it has kind of indie guitars. People are used to it, so it's not weird. But it is also individual sounding and unique sounding, and I don't think has been done before in that exact combination. Because I work with a guitarist. He doesn't, as far as I know, doesn't do any other 80s boogie indie projects. So, you know, by definition, we're working with certain guitar pedals that we put together. I've got my own way of processing the guitars, you know. So all these little individual ways are going to make something which doesn't sound like anyone else, but also isn't just so out there that no one gets it, you know. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's what my answer would be, is that if you do the process properly and you put in the time and effort to do the experiments, then you will come up with something which is unique enough for people to go, that's so-and-so, that isn't so weird that people are like, well, I never want to listen to that because it doesn't make any sense to me and has no point of reference to my taste.
Yeah, and I think the other benefit of the internet now is that even if you did end up deciding that you wanted to make something that, I don't know, was a combination of underwater ear flute music and, I don't know, space age, or whatever, then because of the nature of the internet and the long tail and all of the rest of it, then there would be a subset of people in the world who probably would absolutely love it, and because you were the only person doing it, they'd probably, go absolutely gaga for it. So, I mean, obviously the challenge would be finding those people, and it would take a certain amount of time, but eventually it would actually happen. So I think that the kind of dynamic around that is different now. Obviously there's challenges to reach those people, etc., but I think if you are wondering whether you want to do something that is really out there, then now is a better time than any.
Yeah, 100%. I just want to add something actually as well. One thing that I also have found since starting Get to Know is that once you kind of have come up with a project where you feel like it's kind of honest to you and you can play it to people and it just feels deeply kind of authentic to your taste and stuff like that, then the next thing is, right, okay, so I'm putting stuff up on SoundCloud and I want to launch this. Then you're going into the realms of marketing and all those kind of things. Once you have something which you've taken the time out to make, which is authentic to you, it's a hell of a lot easier to market that than it is if you're just kind of peddling the same thing as everyone else, and it doesn't have that same attachment because you haven't taken time out to do it. So, the stuff you kind of say on social media, the artwork, your persona, all those things are much easier to put together starting from that framework and that basis, a foundation of having something which is authentic. It's much easier to be authentic in all the other aspects of marketing once you actually have a product which is authentic.
Well, yeah, I guess it's because you know that you are expressing you. It makes you feel much more comfortable, doesn't it? I mean, often people say, "Oh, I hate all that marketing and promotion stuff," and I'm sure that most people do hate the marketing promotion stuff, and they're never going to love it. But when you're making music, which is really you, and you've got that kind of the nugget which is you, and it's coming out in your music, which is the goal of this program and this process, obviously. Then I certainly found anyway that you want to shout about it. you want to do the stuff that you need to do because it just feels, it's like you kind of feel a lot more untouchable. Whereas when there's even a little bit of I don't, that thing where you play somebody something and you're a little bit like kind of covering your face up because you're a little bit embarrassed. Well, you're not going to want to market and promote that, are you? But if you're like, check this out, this is, I'm really, really, then it becomes so much easier.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like, it's just taking the time out to work out what that thing is in the first place, because I watch people who are spending like so much time doing the marketing and all that kind of thing, and you're kind of thinking, I think you're pretty better off going away and working more on the sound and getting something which people is going to be valuable for people, because otherwise, no matter how much marketing you do, if it's just the same as everybody else, it's going to have just to be absolutely stellar quality. If it's going to be the same as everyone else, it has to be the best, produced version of that sound, and even then it's still going to be difficult. And you're better off actually just not spending the time doing the marketing, go away, work more on the music, and then when you do have something which is going to be valuable for the reason that it's unique to you, then the marketing's much easier.
So what is the next? What's next for Get to Know? Obviously, you're in the studio at the moment doing a Coldplay remix. Hopefully that eventuates.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's sounding really good actually. I'm excited about it.
Excellent.
So I'm just getting some more originals working with some singers. I'm trying to tone down the remixes at the moment just to try and get as many originals done as possible because I work mainly on song-based music. And also I've just got all these ideas from having done the course of things I want to explore within the project. Some kind of like R&B kind of vibes as well and stuff like that. So it's just getting round. I mean, I've got a list of probably 500 ideas for tracks that I've come up with, and I'm just working through it. So yeah, DJing wise, I've got a show coming up with Tiger and Woods, and then hopefully with Ten Snake as well coming up as just lots of exciting stuff. It's pretty good.
Excellent. So where can people listen to your music?
It's soundcloud.com/get-to-know-UK is probably the best place.
Okay, excellent. I'll
on Spotify.
I'll make sure that goes up on the screen. And just as a final kind of parting farewell, so if there's probably different people, different kinds of producers at different stages in their journey, everything from, people similar to you and I was who, have really got to make every second they spend making music count, to people who are maybe just starting out and thinking, oh, I don't know what kind of music I want to make, to people who've been doing it for years and who've been struggling to break through. To anyone kind of thinking about going on this journey to making unique music, doing the process. I mean, what would if they're not sure, and they're going, what would you say to them after your experiences?
I think if you're, let's take them all each one in turn. So if you're a young producer who's just starting out, you're in some ways a very enviable position of probably having time on your hands, more time than necessary if you're a bit older, to be able to do all these experiments and stuff like that. But then you also have a challenge of, maybe you haven't actually had the time to accumulate as much influence, musical influences to draw from. So there's kind of advantages and disadvantages. But if you start off with this in mind, like I wish that I'd done this when I first started, because it's so powerful to come up with your own unique sound. It's like currency in the music industry. If you have a sound, it's value you're offering. So if you start off with that perspective, it might take you 8 years, 10 years, whatever, before you really get there. But you're going to get there much earlier, and actually you might actually just quit and give up before you even get to that point because you get so disheartened with doing the same thing as everyone else and not getting anywhere. So you just need to start as early as possible, getting into this mindset and starting to do these experiments, and it will happen. I think if you're older and you've been doing it for a long time, that's probably one of the positions that I was in. I'd done, I'd had a couple of projects, doing it for about 10 years or whatever at that point. I mean, it's the same thing. It's great for whoever it is. It's like you need to create value. It's simple. You need to make a product. You need to think of the music in some ways as a product which is valuable. Make the same thing as everyone else. You better make sure it's like head and shoulders above everybody else. Otherwise, you're just fighting for scraps with everybody else. If you're making something which is unique, it's immediate currency and value in music. And all the labels I've come across, all the A&R people, I can assure you that is what they're looking for. They're not looking for a well-produced version of all the other people they've already got signed. They want the next Skrillex. They want the next Prodigy. Or whoever. They want the person that comes with something which changes. They want the person that comes with something that everyone else is copying.
Yes, exactly.
They don't want the copiers. They want the leaders. And it's also about, to me, it's about reactivity and proactivity. Are you reacting to what's going on and just copying it, or are you proactively trying to drive what's going on in music? If you spend every January Google what are going to be the music trends of this year, and there'll be people speculating what they think the music trends are going to be, and usually they're wrong, because that's not how it works. The music trends are set by people doing what this course teaches.
Yeah.
Sitting there, going deeply into who they are, what they like, putting things together, synthesizing them, coming up with something unique that people go, that's new, that's fresh, that's going to drive the trends, and loads of people are going to copy it. You know,
Well,
that's how.
Yeah, totally. And I think you just kind of hit on something else as well about it, because we were talking about the confidence that you have as a result of sort of doing this process, and you kind of get this confidence in your music, which allows you to market and promote your music. But the other side of it as well is that I noticed in the studio, when I was confident about what I was doing, the music came out so much easier, and it was so much better as well. Like it just you could hear there was just this. It was almost like swagger to it, if you know what I mean. You're just on it. You're on fire. You know what I mean, and you know you're on fire, and that only can really happen when you are being true to yourself. And it's such a a lot of people say, oh, but be true to yourself. But it's like, how do you do that? How do you actually get to the point of being true to yourself? And I guess this process is one of the ways that you could do that. You know what I mean? It's how to find what your true self is.
It's true. Also, something that just popped into my head, is that we're all music producers. You know, we've got a lot to think about. You know, you've got to think about all these different things. You've got to think about EQ, compression, what the music is you're going to make, what equipment you're going to use. There's a lot of things to think about. You know, you've basically gone away, stopped making music, and taken the mental space of making music to design a course which allows you to make unique music. I've always known throughout my career that you need to try and make unique music. You see the people coming with their own sound and getting huge amounts of success. You know, I think everyone knows deep down that you do need to have your own unique sound. But actually, you know, having the kind of the mental space of sitting down and working out what that is, like, or not what that is, but the process of getting there. You know, I don't think people have the time or the mental energy to actually make music at the same time as thinking about how they could put that into some kind of like tangible process that they follow. You know, that's what you've done. You know, you've gone away and you've put that energy into coming up with a tangible process for how, like, a step-by-step guide. I mean, who would have ever thought that there would be a course
on how to I wish. I mean, this is the. I wish there had been a course when I was making music. But I mean, I think one of the reasons I stopped making music was because I knew that I wouldn't be able to do anything like this without that distance between the process of making music and then actually like going, okay, so this is what happened. This is how it works. This is like the unique style generator, and all of these are all the bits going in. If I was in the middle of it, there's no way I would be able to view it. So there's this kind of, it is a. Sometimes I do question myself, and I'm like, I'm not actually making music now, but I'm teaching people about making music. But actually, I think it really helps me to, because I did it for 17 years. I did like well over 20,000, 25,000 hours in the studio. I mean, I did a long time, but not doing it actually gives me the ability to see it objectively, like really objectively, like not be all kind of emotionally like tied up with it and like and there isn't a hidden agenda to what I'm doing. I'm not trying to push my own thing or anything. I'm just seeing it as a kind of, it's almost like a kind of, it's dispassionate sort of, okay, so this is how it works. This is how you break it down. Because I've had, how long's it been now? Like 5 years or something from making music, which gives me the ability to do this. So, and I mean, when I think about what I'm actually doing, I remember I was like, well, I mean, either the way I see it anyway, is that either I can have the impact of my music, which is this amount of impact on the world, or I can help people like you make music, and probably hundreds, thousands, however many make music, which sort of in my weird way of looking at it is multiplied impact on the world, which is because I do often get the question, why did you stop making music? It's basically because my number one sort of, what's the word, value, the thing that kind of drives me is making an impact, a positive impact on the world. And I felt that no matter how great my music could become or how unique it could become personally, that my impact was much better served by doing this, because I was always really interested in how what I was doing worked and why it worked and why sometimes it didn't work and sometimes it did work. And so, I guess this is my unique style.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such a great thing to be a producer and to have that laid out, so you don't have to think about it. You just follow. Yeah, it's like the kind of the workman part of your kind of brain, just has to follow the steps, and we like that. It's like you don't have to. You have to think, but you don't have to think about. You don't have to think about what you're going to think about. You just have to go and do it. And it's taking a step away from that. It's like it's an amazing thing, because it always struck me as something that was kind of like just happen by chance or by, I don't know. It was like, maybe it's just kind of a magical gift that people have, that suddenly they're able to have this unique sound, But probably those people have just, without knowing they're following that course, have just folled that course. They're just more intelligent than me and have come up with it.
I think there is an element to what I do of actually looking at what various people have done and literally seeing how, breaking it down, sort of reverse engineering it, and then go, okay, so these are the different bits, and this is how it works. And I think some people might think that takes the magic away, but all it does is create more magic, because then more people can do it. So,
it's very interesting, because sometimes I listen to artists, and now I can hear the reference points, much better. I'm very in tune to that. So it's, especially if you listen widely, then you recognise a lot of things. So suddenly I can see they're drawing on this, and then you read an interview 6 months later and they're saying, I'm really into this and that. And,
I knew you were.
I recognise it. It's very interesting. More interesting than how they EQ and compress stuff, And I actually did
even you're saying that, being CR2's mixing engineer.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing to start with is the track. I watched a very interesting TED talk. This guy was talking about Apple and how their thing is that the TED talk was all about starting with the why, so why you're doing something. And he uses Apple as the example. So their whole thing is thinking differently, and all the products are kind of built on that premise. And then they go from there. And I think you can kind of take something from that and apply it to music. That you have to start with the track. Why are you making it? What's its function? What are you trying to express about yourself, or what you're into, and who you are, and all that kind of thing. And then you worry about the mixing and mastering afterwards. You don't come up with something which is just the same as everyone else, and then mix and master it to sound amazing, and then suddenly it's going to be huge. People go out, they open Spotify and listen to stuff. They buy things on iTunes because it moves them and it reminds them of something and makes them, just gives them a feeling and an emotion. They don't do it because they don't buy mixing and mastering. No. They buy feelings, emotions. They buy music that makes them want to go out and party or fall in love or fight, depending on what the music is. They just buy raw emotions, and that's what music is, and that's why we all got into it in the first place, because that's what it gave us. It's just emotional feelings, and they don't get emotional feelings from mixing and mastering. No. They might get feelings from mixing, but they get feelings from mixing and how it relates to you, who you are, your musical influence, and what you're trying to create in them. They don't get it from the way you've immaculately EQ'd and compressed things. They get it because you're using mixing and mastering to create feeling and emotion in the music as well. And that is all part of trying to create something which is unique, and you're putting authenticity and yourself into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think if one of the things you are is a mixing and mastering engineer, so you, for instance, then the mixing and mastering is going to be really important in your music, because it's who you are. I mean, I was never a mixing and mastering engineer at all, but I did all of my mixing. I didn't do my mastering. But my limitations in that area meant that I did certain things and I didn't do other things because I was being true to myself. So there were certain things that I just didn't go near because it was like, well, I can't do that right now, so I'm going to. So those limitations are in fact one of the things that make you unique. So if you are limited in skill in some area, great. That is something that you can work with. Don't I often get people and they're like, yeah, but I really want to, I want to do like orchestral strings over the top. And I was like, okay, so, what's your musical training? So I haven't got any musical training. I'm like, so what you're saying is that you're going to go to a conservatoire and learn, and only after you've learned how to orchestrate like loads of strings are you going to be able to make music. I mean, that is like one of the things you are is where your skills are at. And you can make great music with limited skills. It's just going to not be certain things that maybe you love, but that's okay. It's about so in terms of the mixing and mastering thing, if there are certain things that you can't do yet, then don't do them. Do something else. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and I think for me certainly the mixing was simply allowing. For me anyway, mixing was about. If I was having to do too much mixing at the end, then I'd done the way I thought about it anyway was that I'd done something wrong or I hadn't done something right beforehand. Because if I knew it was a good mix, if I didn't really need to mix, my goal was to not have to really mix anything, because the mixing was done in the sound choice, in the way that I, created the parts and chose the sounds and placed them, essentially, not in all of the, mindless knob twiddling. It was just,
track mixes. I mean, I don't really do a formal mix down on my tracks. I try and place the sounds without any processing so they sound good, and then anything I add is just sweetening it, and then then mixing. I mean, to me, mixing is all part of this process as well. So, sound design and mixing, I don't really separate that out anyway. And my list of sound ideas that I've taken from other tracks that I want to integrate into mine, that is mixing as well. A flange reverse piano, a flanger is an effect you add for mixing, but mixing is no. Like, if you're thinking, well, I don't know if I should sign up and do this course because I want to do a mixing and mastering course, I don't see those as two separate things. I see possibly mastering, but mixing, I see that as being part and parcel of this process as well. It's not separate from it. Like, mixing is an expression of it's trying to reach these sounds that you're putting in your music because you want to express something. So it's all the same process, really. It's all part of the same thing.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, the only way you can really learn how to do any of this is just by doing it. So,
it's actually amazing how many interviews you see with people like computer music and future music getting interviewed, and the first thing they say is, "I'm not very technical. I don't really know, a lot of the technical stuff." I watched one with Avicii, and he's saying the same thing. I don't really know. I'm not that technical. He was using Fruity Loops, and whether you like that kind of music or not, he's been pretty successful.
Yeah, exactly.
He's produced some great crossover pop music, and that's from a guy who's not very technical.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I've been doing this for a long time. Yeah. I deal with the mixing and mastering and stuff like that. I'm telling you, it's much more important to come up with unique music than it is to learn how to mix and master. It's simple as that, because it goes back to how we started. There's 5,000 tracks a day on Beatport. A lot of those are well mixed and well mastered. It makes a difference. Of course, it makes a difference, but it pales in comparison to the difference it makes to come up with something which pricks people's ears. We do a service at CR2 called Mastering and Feedback. So people send in their track. I send them a breakdown of feedback of what I think of, initial impressions, mixing, production, and then a kind of overall feeling at the end. I send it to them. They then alter the track, and then I master it. So it's a service we offer. It's very popular. Lots of people sign up for it. So it's quite interesting because I get sent a lot of music from this, And I'm telling you, the one that, like, if someone sends me something which the mixing and mastering is really not the mastering, the mixing is not on point, but it's different and it's interesting and it's fresh, that is just so much more important than if someone sends me a track which sounds just like everybody else but is well mixed. I'm like, cool, it's well mixed, Now you need to go away and think of something and come up with something which is a bit more unique to you, because
now you've done the easy part. You've done the easy part. Yep. Now do the difficult part.
Exactly. It's simple as that, and it's interesting because you get people that send stuff through, which is the mixing is like it's all over the place, but the idea is interesting and fresh, and it doesn't actually take that much, because especially in the kind of like the big room genres, it's just everything is the same, It doesn't take that much to make something which is interesting,
Yeah.
Like just something, just anything which is like just breaks the mold a little bit, and as soon as you hear it, it's like my ears are pricking up, and my feedback is like, well done for coming up with something which is actually was interesting to listen to, and then also, you know what? You can pay people to mix your tracks.
Well, I was about to say. I mean, that was exactly what I was going to say. If you're wondering, if you're questioning what we're saying here, if you're watching this and you're currently questioning what we're saying here, if you were saying you have to give one part of the production process to somebody else, you had to give one part of it. Would you give them the music writing, or would you give them the mixing? I mean, if you gave them the music writing, the music wouldn't be yours, would it? I mean, it's like that tells you in one sentence where the value is, where you really want to be focused, and it's on the music. I mean, again, as we've both said a number of times, that doesn't mean the mixing isn't important. Of course it is, but it becomes more important when the music is there at the end of the day.
100%.
Great. So I think we've definitely flogged that dead horse now, but I think it's worth flogging given the sort of the way that it kind of is online about production, because it's all about that kind of stuff, and I think sometimes people need to be told more than once to really.
It's an easier thing to learn, I think, isn't it? It's an easier thing to it's easier to say, it's I'm not getting anywhere because I need to learn more mixing and more production, because it's a lot less thought has to go into learning mixing and production, and it's a lot scarier to have to go deep within yourself and try and come up with a unique sound. Is a lot harder, but you get rewards for doing that process, and I can really attest to that just from my own experience of all the opportunities coming to me, because I'm creating something which is obviously is valuable to people, because that's why they're coming.
Excellent. Well, long may it continue, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you do in a few. Maybe we can do another interview further down the line when you've. I don't know what you'll be doing in 6 months. Maybe your sound will have progressed into underwater ear flute music by then, but we'll see. But thanks very much. Thanks very much for doing this. It's been an absolute pleasure. And everyone, make sure you go and listen to Larry's music right now at soundcloud.com/gettoknowuk.